Hello, welcome to the Warframe Collective. Today, we are going to be heading to the open worlds and we are going to be farming standing for the open worlds. And we're going to be showing players how to max out their daily standing in about 45 minutes per run. Now, the first thing you want to do is head to Fortuna, come over to the business and buy a trank rifle because this is going to allow you to catch wildlife on the open world. And catching wildlife yields a lot of standing. So make sure you grab the trank rifle. And as for the lures are actually pretty good sometimes. The lures are usually all RNG. So you can pick up the lures if you have the extra standing. Otherwise, you may not even need them. But another reason to farm animals is so you can get some of these floofs and you can deck out your ship with them. But yeah, once you head to Cetus, head to Master Tensai and buy any lures from him, assuming you want to use them, and then go ahead and head out to the plains of Eidolon. Also, the fastest way to do this is always going to be by using your Arcwing. So make sure you have your Arcwing equipped, pull out your Trank rifle, and you can use any lures you want to use in order to kick off the run. But like I said, these lures don't always work. They're usually pretty RNG. But what they do is, I swear, they make some animal spawn. It may not always be the animal you're looking for, but usually after using a lure, the trank rifle will start pinging. You'll hear the trank rifle pinging. That means that there is wildlife nearby that can be caught. And this is the point where you have to actually be kind of careful because you have to kind of use your trank rifle to look around and find the animal that's pinging on your rifle. And it might be a little daunting at first, but once you catch your first few animals, you'll see the process really isn't that bad. So as you can see, I'm just kind of using my trank rifle to look around until I spot the animal it's pinging. And as you can see, I do spot them all the way in the distance over here. And these trank rifles can ping enemies from pretty far away. And so with these Kondroks, right? With these Kondroks, unless you're like some kind of crack shot, usually you'll get two of these Kondroks out of three. You'll see a committee of three Kondroks, and usually you'll get two out of three because, I don't know, the projectile speed is just really slow on these Trank bullets. But the Trank rifle can pick up enemies from extremely far away. So usually, if you're having trouble finding the animal it's pinging, try looking above you or try looking directly below you sometimes. At nighttime, you'll find a lot of these wild kavats, right? These blood-sucking kavats. And if you don't have the Vaska kavat, you can actually use these kavats to infect your own kavat and then extract the serum from him. That way, when you're using the serum to create a new kavat, you can automatically get a Vaska kavat. That's roughly how you get the Vaska. And I like the Vaska because the Vaska usually can revive you with half its health, I believe. But another thing that I screwed up on, guys, is I am doing this on the still path. So when you do this run, make sure you do not have the still path enabled, or else you're going to have all kinds of problems. But as you can see, this thing can ping from really far away. So as long as you can spot the dot on your map that's glowing, that's the location of the animal you need to be catching. So like I said earlier, these runs are all RNG, right? And one way I found that's a lot better than using the lures is to just fly around, and once you hear an animal, usually there's an animal nearby. So when you hear an animal, just immediately stop and start looking around. That is by far the most effective way I found to catch these animals is just by simply listening for them. But the lures are good because the lures are going to show you what the enemies sound like, right? And so when you're flying around and you hear that, you're going to automatically know, hey, there's an animal nearby, so let me stop and look around. So when I'm on the plains of Eidolon hunting wildlife, usually what I like to shoot for is the Chondrox because I feel like the Chondrox provide the most standing for how many of them you encounter. But unfortunately on this run, I didn't encounter many Chondrox. The main animal that I was encountering on this run was the Kawakas. And the one thing that's gonna annoy you when you're doing this are those Grenier Tusk Dargans. Those things will fly around and harass you while you're hunting wildlife. But the thing is, if you stay close to the entrance of the plains, they won't mess with you right there because I don't know, it's like out of their aggro radius. But every now and then you'll get a stray one that will come. But for the most part, as long as you kind of stay near the entrance, they won't really mess with you that much. But considering the fact that I want to play the game, I'm gonna keep flying around just to, show you guys some of the hot spots where you can find these guys. But even then, like I said, it's all RNG. The best thing I can say is just to listen for them because that's by far the most effective tactic. And considering the fact that this is all RNG, one thing that you're going to notice is sometimes when you do these runs, you can finish your entire run in less than 20 minutes, depending on what you're able to catch. But if you're not having decent luck finding animals worth a lot of standing, then it's probably going to take you around 45 minutes. But that still isn't a bad thing. 45 minutes to max out seated standing for the day, that's a small price to pay, especially to have such a easy route to get the standing because I don't know about you guys, but I get tired of grinding those Cetus missions from Kanzu. But the thing is, don't cut out those missions from Kanzu completely because at the end of the day, when you're leveling up on the plains of Eidolon, some of the resources that you require to advance to the next rank come directly from Kanzu. Look at this right here. I caught two perfect Kondroks and they gave me 1800 standing each. So yeah, Kondroks are absolutely the way to go. But unfortunately, because the way they're spaced out, it's kind of hard to nail all three before they fly away. So usually I end up getting two out of the three. But if you can get Kondroks to just keep spawning consistently, you'll knock this out in absolutely no time. Another thing that's also important when it comes to leveling up on the plains is fishing, because some of the most vital resources that you're going to need come from fish. And look at this right here. As you guys can see, I do get melted, right? Because like I said, we are on the still path right now. And so I would not advise doing this on the still path. And as you can see, I'm getting swarmed by ghouls and Grenier right here, so I gotta kind of clear these guys out pretty quickly. And then on top of that, I got magnetic on my secondary. I gotta switch to my primary to hit him with that corrosive. And unfortunately, this glitched out the animal. As you can see, I got this level 114 Kondrok right here, and I can't even capture him because it glitched out due to the skill path nature of the game. Sometimes that's going to happen to you where you trank an animal and then you get into combat, and then for some reason the animal that you tranked just kind of completely tweaks out and you can't capture them. In those cases, just move on. Just move on and keep capturing the wildlife that you can easily catch. And so, right here, I find myself by the entrance again, and mad Kawaka starts spawning, right? So, at this point, I just start farming this area right here because so many Kawakas started spawning. It kind of made the run a lot easier, especially considering the fact that I'm right by the door of the Plains of Eidolon, and enemies usually will not aggro you as long as you're close to the door. And as you can see, these guys are starting to pop up like hotcakes, right? So I'm just gonna stay in this area and keep farming Kawakas because it's extremely safe, and we're almost at the daily standing cap anyway. So, you know, as for fishing, like I said, you want to make sure that you're fishing on the plains because those are some of the most vital resources when it comes to leveling up on the plains. And eventually, for one of the last standing offerings, you're going to need a serum beetle shell, right? And that is only going to come from a special fish that spawns at night on the plains of Eidolon in certain locations. And I can't remember the name of the fish right off the top of my head, but trust and believe, when the time comes when you need that serum beetle shell, I guarantee you're going to find that fish. So don't even worry about it. Another thing that's good for farming rare resources on the plains that will let you bypass some of the requirements for resources that you need from fishing are farming those tusk thumpers on the plains of Eidolon. You know those big ass tank looking siege dancer motherfuckers that crawl around the plains, and then if they see you, they aggro and they start stomping the ground and all kinds of shit. Those guys are so good for rare resources on the plains. Those guys drop so many rare resources, from jewels to mercray fish liver. Like, if you manage to farm a couple of those guys, I would say, just come in on normal and just beat the shit out of their crit spots. Those guys drop rare resources like it's nobody's business. And as long as you're hitting those crit spots, they're not that hard to beat. And as you guys can see, we have completed the mission, and I have accumulated 27,775 standing in 29 minutes. And that's going to be the plains of Eidolon all done. And as you guys can see, if I come over here to Kanzu, I still have a tiny bit of standing available, but I only have like, what, 1,200 standing available. What's that, like one Kandra capture? What's that, like two Kawaka captures? So we've pretty much maxed out our daily standing for Cetus. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna head over to Fortuna. So Fortuna is a little different. Like, the RNG on Fortuna can either be really good to where you get this done really quick, or it could be extremely bad. And I've had really good runs going after those, I think they're called sawgaws, those sawgaw birds. Those usually provide a decent amount of standing, and there's a ton of them. But, just start looking around, right? And you'll start encountering animals that you don't even have the lures for. But yeah, we got a white-breasted Famik. I don't know how to pronounce that, but yeah, these guys can usually be found roaming in a pair or roaming solo, but they only give about like 600 to, I think you can get 1,000 standing for those if it's a perfect capture. Otherwise, not really the guys you want to be looking for. But usually you can find them pretty easily because they're just kind of crawling around Fortuna. So yeah, these guys are pretty decent. 450 for that one. Next, moving on. So once again, when you're finding animals on the plains, you can either use a lure, or the most effective tactic is just to listen for them. And some animals have armor, like the one you can see right here. You see, I'm putting all kinds of trank arrows in it, and I'm having absolutely zero effect. So the key to getting these little porcupine fuckers are to get a shot off on their underbelly, right? Because their underbelly is not going to be armored. So keep that in mind if you spot these guys. What's his name? A spotted Barlova. If you spot those guys, just keep in mind that you really need to be shooting at their underbelly, and you will be getting harassed by a bunch of corpus. So make sure you get the hell out of here. And these birds, right? These birds are really good for standing, but as you can see, this one just kind of glitched out through the mountain, but I'm still able to locate them. The thing about these birds is, unlike Kondroks, they don't just fly away. What these guys will do is they will fly to another location, and they can usually be found on the top of these mushroom-like things, but these guys will fly to another location, and as long as you can track them, you can simply just follow them to their next location and wait till they land. So those guys are actually really good for standing. And then a lot of times when I'm farming those birds, a lot of times I catch them in like groups of 3, maybe not all bunched up together, but a lot of times they'll just be on like 3 different mushrooms in close proximity. So keep that in mind. Sometimes when there's one of these birds around, there's 2 of them around. This little guy right here, this draped Harask, I don't think I've ever seen that guy. And I think that might have been the first of that species that I have actually captured. Right here, I got another one of these porcupine fuckers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait for him to open up, and I'm gonna just try to hit his underbelly, right? If you're having trouble getting to that underbelly, just get him to turn into a ball, and then like he'll look and make sure the coast is clear eventually. When he peeks out, he'll be kind of on his back, and that's when you want to nail that underbelly. And these guys are pretty cute. Look at them. Those guys are pretty cute. So once again, as you can see with these guys, these Vimics, as you can see, sometimes they can be found roaming solo, but other times they can actually be found in groups. So yeah, keep that in mind. I think the rarest animal that you can catch on the plains is gonna be the Kubrodon. But the Kubrodons are pretty rare, and they're usually found roaming solo. So keep that in mind. As for these little rat guys, these are basically Fortuna's version of a Kawaka, these little dudes. So these guys aren't worth that much standing, and to be honest, they can't be found as consistently as Kawakas. But yeah, keep in mind those guys are pretty good. And as you can see, I got some of these sawgoas right here, and I just kind of follow them to their next location, wait till they land, and I put a couple trank arrows in them, and bam, that's them all done. And I really like farming these guys because they don't just fly away, you know. As long as you can be diligent and track these guys, you'll eventually get the capture. And they're good because they can be found in groups. Anything that can be found in groups provides a decent amount of standing. And as you can see, for these little guys, if you don't get on them really quick, they'll just kind of run away and disappear into the mountains. So right here out at the very kind of center of the map, I found another Vamik roaming. And keep in mind, guys, when you're hunting these animals, look on your map because your map will usually tell you all the hot spots. But the thing is, even with the map, I find the most effective way is just by flying around and listening for these animals. That's how I'm finding majority of these captures. I'm just flying around, and as soon as I hear an animal, I just stop and start looking around. And look, in this case, we found 3 sawgaws. So yeah, I think it's a pretty effective tactic rather than standing in one spot with a lure and hoping something comes to you. So apparently, I received a trophy for this, an animal lover trophy. And I'm surprised I don't have all the trophies in Warframe already. So that's got to be one of my last trophies. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, what percentage of players actually have that trophy? Because I have well over 2,000 hours played in this game, and I'm just now getting that trophy. So it kind of makes you wonder. Anyway, moving on, we found 2 more white-breasted Vamiks, and some of these guys have armor, right? So it's going to take multiple shots to take down. Keep that in mind. Some of these guys you can't just one tap depending on what breed it is. They'll take multiple. Usually, a good indication of if they have armor or not is if they have the armor insignia next to their health bar. If they have that, that usually means they have some level of armor and they may take multiple shots to take down. Another thing I hate about Fortuna is the aggro radius of the enemies, because if you're in one spot for too long, the enemies will just automatically aggro on you, and it's not a good time. And you end up having to completely fly out of the area in order to lose aggro. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're hunting for these guys. Try to maintain a decent distance from the animals you're trying to capture, not just because you don't want to alert the animals, but because if you're close enough to the ground, any corpus units in the area will kind of just aggro towards you. And yeah, you don't want that, guys. You can see I found another sawgaw towards the very edge of the map. Make sure you're keeping an eye on top of these little mushroom things because I often find them over here. Out of all of the open worlds we have in Warframe, I think Fortuna may be my least favorite open world because I don't know, the map is just kind of a mess. And sometimes it just makes farming this area really hard as opposed to the plains where everything is pretty simple. In Fortuna, there's a lot of mountainous structures that kind of hide stuff. There's a lot of crevices and valleys in Fortuna, and it makes the farm just that much harder. So right here, right? I'm actually able to catch a Kubrodon. And like I said, these Kubrodons are some of the rarest enemies on the plains. You might have to trank this guy like 3 times, but these guys are few and far between. And usually when you find one, it's always a perfect capture because they're so rare. And as you can see, this guy is worth 2,000 standing. So as you can see, we're going to extract, and we've accumulated 22,000 standing from that run. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to Deimos, and we're going to fast travel to the sun because the sun is the animal vendor on Deimos. So as you can see, the sun has a fuck ton of lures available for all the wildlife that you might encounter on Deimos. And like I said, you don't necessarily need these things, but if you want to go ahead and grab them, that's all you. The one lure that is actually worth it is this one, the Avikaya lure. Those birds are so fucking rare, and then on top of that, in order to level up on Deimos, at some point you're gonna need tags from that bird. So it doesn't hurt to have lures from this guy. This guy is also the pet vendor. So anytime you find a Vulpaphyla, this is gonna be the guy you come to for, I think the process is revivification or some shit. It's basically to make that animal your own, right? But for now, I'm just gonna move out onto the Deimos open world, and I'm gonna use two of the bird lures, the Avikaya lures, because those guys are so rare. But even then, like I said, even when you use those lures, it doesn't necessarily mean the animal you use the lure on is gonna pop up. See, in this case, I get a Vulpaphyla right here because these guys are notorious for duking it out with the wildlife on Deimos. And this actually isn't a Vulpaphyla. This is a Predacite. This is another one of the most common captures on Deimos. They're so common because they're always fighting infested. So when they lose, you'll see their tags pop up on the match. Those guys are always pretty easy because oftentimes, because they're down, you kind of just have to swoop in there and grab their tag. And right here, I encountered two of the birds, the Avikaya. I believe that's how you pronounce those names. But as you can see, if you don't get on these guys really quick, they will just fly away and you won't be able to catch them. And even though this is a bad capture, it doesn't matter because these things are so rare that anyone you get is going to be actually really good. So in the caves, you can find these guys a lot, right? These guys are basically Deimos's version of the Kawakas, right? You'll find them on roofs and you'll find them scurrying on the floor of many caves. These guys are called Cryptolex. Cryptolex, I think burrowing Cryptolex. But these guys are usually kind of rare because they can only be found in caves, and usually by the time you find them, they're already retreating because they've already been alerted to your presence. And as you can see, this guy was retreating and he's on the roof right now, but I tranked him like 5 or 6 times and he's not responding at all. So instead of worrying about that guy, I just kind of leave the area. That way I can go for the next wildlife. And as you can see, right outside the cave, we find some purple velocipods. I think these guys may take multiple shots to trank. And one thing about these guys is you have to be careful because these guys can actually fly towards you and put you down with that big spike on their face. And I think that's kind of a cool detail. Also, you can get one of these guys and you can replace your K drive with these guys. You can get one of these guys and you can ride them like a K drive. So keep that in mind. Sometimes when you're hunting these guys, they will get stuck in the Deimos water and you'll have to trank them from there. But usually you can still grab their tag even if it sinks below the map as long as you're kind of consistent. So for our next capture right here, I captured this thing and I don't think I've ever captured one of these before. This thing is new to me. What's the name of this thing? This thing is an Undoze, Undazo. I've never seen one of these scary motherfuckers before, and that would lead me to believe that they're actually quite rare because I've caught a fuck ton of wildlife on Deimos, but I've never caught one of those things. Those things look like they're straight out of a horror movie. So that's kind of cool. Sometimes these little guys can be found above ground, but usually you'll find them in caves. And a lot of times when you find them in caves, they have that translucent effect. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but they have that effect to where they're glowing purple. And as you can see right here, I kind of luck out and I find two Avocaya, but these guys are flying around. I managed to get one shot off on that guy after I aggroed him, which is really lucky because of the travel time of these darts. It's hard to, calculate the projectile travel time, especially when you have these animals moving in random patterns. And a lot of times, if you have a flying animal that's near the edge of the map, you don't want to trank him and you don't want him to fly off the edge. So keep that in mind. These guys are extremely rare. And if you manage to capture a couple of these on your run, I'd consider that a W within itself. So, one thing that I do hate about Deimos are the enemies. Deimos has some of the most aggressive, frustrating enemies in the entire game. And then on top of that, a lot of times they have flying enemies also in the form of those infested drone guys who will fly around, find you, and grab your face. Those guys are so annoying and they will pursue you across the map to the point where you really gotta like kind of duck into a cave, or you kind of have to duck off the side of the map in order to get these guys to leave you alone. So make sure you keep a lookout for when it says projectile incoming on your arc wing. When it says that, I'd advise you just kind of get the hell out of the area, because the thing about those guys is you have to really shoot those guys, and it kind of sucks to have to switch off of your trank rifle to switch back to your gun just to kill one enemy. That way you can switch back to your trank rifle and keep doing what you're originally doing. And one thing that you may have noticed by now about us collecting standing on Deimos is that as we are capturing wildlife and we are collecting those tags, we aren't necessarily accumulating any standing. And that's because Deimos standing system works kind of different. It actually works a little better because it's a token system, but it works kind of different when accumulating standing using traditional methods. So, in Deimos, considering that the standing system is all based off tokens, if you want standing from the wildlife that you just caught, you would have to go to the sun and you would have to turn in all of your tags. And for turning in all of your tags, you're going to receive tokens from the sun that you can use to accumulate standing. But the thing about that is, if you are planning to level up on Deimos, you will need a fuck ton of this guy's tokens, and his tokens are some of the rarest tokens in the game, just for the simple fact that some of the wildlife on Deimos is really rare. So if you do turn in your tags for some of these tokens, I would advise you save those tokens. Do not use these tokens for standing because they're way too rare. Anyway, guys, that is going to wrap this up. hit that subscribe button, bro. Hit that subscribe button because that shit costs your ass nothing, and you know it's gonna help your boy out. So hit that subscribe button. Anyway, have a beautiful day, guys. Peace.